CBS's Lesley Stahl may have just effectively ruined her career and whatever legacy she had remaining. We'll show you the ugly, and I mean ugly, moment that occurred on 60 Minutes coming up in just a moment. Plus, Scott Jennings with a throwdown with his host, Abby Phillips, treating him like a child. It's outrageous. We'll show it to you. Also, something about Donald Trump makes Democrats defend the indefensible, and that's what they did today in the House of Representatives. And finally, Tim Walz's daughter. You thought he was nuts. You thought his wife was nuts. His daughter? Oh, boy. We're going to get to all that and a whole lot more coming up right now. We're brought to you by Birch Gold. My name's Larry O'Connor, and you can call me Larry. We keep hearing tomorrow is Liberation Day, and Donald Trump is going to announce a bunch of tariffs. Yeah, we got tariffs coming up. We got recession fears still looming. We got stubborn inflation that just won't go away. This is the environment where gold has been routinely hitting all-time highs. And in volatile markets like we're getting right now, don't sit on the sidelines with your head in the sand. You want to take control and safeguard your savings. That's why so many Americans today are turning to Birch Gold Group. They've helped tens of thousands convert an existing IRA or 401k into an IRA in physical gold. Is it time for you to find out if you can hedge against inflation and economic instability with gold? I think so. Why don't you get the information right now? Learn how you can own physical gold in a tax-sheltered account. Just text my name, Larry, to 989898. Birch Gold's going to send you a free no-obligation info kit. Again, text my name, Larry, L-A-R-R-Y, to the number 989898. You're going to connect with an A-plus rated with the Better Business Bureau, countless five-star review organization, Birch Gold. It's why I count on them. It took us decades to get into this tangled mess. And how long is it going to take to get out of it? Well, why don't you do what you can? Text Larry, L-A-R-R-Y, 989898. Do that today. I'm no fan of Lesley Stahl. I really marveled at how she's had such a long career. And if you think about it, name the one thing that Lesley Stahl has done that was fantastic. The one thing that's noteworthy. It's like, wow, Lesley Stahl, she's that reporter who did X. Yeah, go ahead and think that through for a minute. Because right now, I think the only answer to that question is that Lesley Stahl is the CBS News journalist who did this.
The terrorists became very mean and very cruel and violent.
More so.
Much more so. They were beating me and starving me.
Do you think they starved you or they just didn't have food?
No, I think they starved me, and they would often eat in front of me and not offer me food.
That's Lesley Stahl. That's 60 Minutes. That's CBS News. She's interviewing a freed American Israeli hostage who was captured and has been subsequently tortured for months and months by Hamas terrorists. Did you see what she did?
The terrorists became very mean and very cruel and violent.
More so.
Much more so. They were beating me and starving me.
Do you think they starved you or they just didn't have food?
Look at that face. You have to be an Upper West Side of Manhattan intellectual to even form the thought in your head, let alone then make the synapses inspire you to say something that vile out loud while sitting across from a freed hostage, a person who was tortured by terrorists. Sure, they didn't feed you, but of course, you know, the Israelis, they cut off the supply line, so they didn't have any food, so it's really Netanyahu's fault. Oh, yeah, they may have starved you, but, you know, they were starving too. I've seen it on social media. You know, the Palestinians, they're the real victims here. They didn't really starve you. They just didn't have food themselves. Right. By the way, I love the fact that she leaves out the whole beating part. Maybe the beating part was a clue, Les. Right? What does he say they did?
Cruel and violent.
More so.
Much more so. They were beating me and starving me.
Oh, sure. They were beating you. I mean, come on. You probably deserved it after all. You are Jewish. But the starving part, we understand that because they probably didn't have enough food themselves. By the way, have you seen these hostages when they get released? They're so emaciated, their skin is hanging off of their bones. And by the way, if you took a second, you know, this is one of my favorite things about these journalists, these so-called reporters, these so-called media figures who don't actually follow the news much. I'm silly this way. I think if I'm going to come in front of a camera and speak into a microphone and tell you about what's going on in the news, that I should actually follow the news. I can actually see what's going on. I've seen these hostages being released. And not only do I see how starved and emaciated and tortured they are, but I look at the terrorists. They seem to be doing okay. They seem pretty healthy. Some of them have pot bellies. I promise you, they're eating high on the hog there in Hamasville, right up until the rocket comes blasting through their windows, rightly so. What kind of despicable, evil, Frank? I mean, I know, that's so stupid, that's so dumb. Yeah, she's pretty stupid, she's pretty dumb. This is also pretty evil. What kind of lack of humanity do you have to possess to sit across from this man who is a torture? God bless him, he's been liberated. And say, well, I mean, were they starving you, or did they just not have food themselves? The budget's pretty tight over there. They got to feed themselves first, and then whatever's left over, sure, they'll give to you. Did the Nazis really murder all those Jews in the Holocaust, or was it just sort of, they had to take care of themselves, and at the end of the day, what are you going to do with all these Jews lying around? It's evil. It's evil. And this is Lesley Stahl. This is her legacy. This is the only thing that you should remember about her. Actually, there's one other thing you should remember about her, and we'll share that with you in just a minute. But seriously, and why is it you don't hear anything from her colleagues? Right? Colleagues on competitor networks. See, I would think if I'm at CNN, I'm like, I want to get better ratings than CBS. I want to do better than CBS. I want to prove to my viewers on CNN that I'm better than CBS. So why isn't every anchor on CNN showing this, saying, wow, what the hell is Lesley Stahl thinking? They're terrible over there. I'll answer that question in a minute. Remind me, Kevin, if I forget. Let's go to CNN, where they did have a discussion about this. And Scott Jennings, thankfully, because he doesn't fashion himself a reporter or a journalist, he's not in the club with Lesley Stahl, so he's allowed to, tell the truth.
We are back, and it's time for the News Nightcap, Torpedo Bat Edition. The Yankees are setting a franchise home run record with a new type of baseball bat, ones with different shapes and that aren't against the rules, apparently. So each of you now have a few seconds to tell us what else is overdue for an upgrade.
They make those bats in Louisville, Kentucky at Louisville Slugger, so congrats down there. Look, mine is this, an everyday item that needs an upgrade, Lesley Stahl at 60 Minutes. After I saw Lesley ask hostage Keith Siegel this weekend, when he said he'd been starved in captivity, he said, well, maybe they just didn't have enough food to give you. And he had to set her straight. She's been there since 1991. Well, I'm sorry, Lesley, it's time for an upgrade. That was a terrible question.
They were beating me and starving me.
Do you think they starved you, or they just didn't have food?
Yeah, that's pretty awful. Good job on Scott Jennings there. And he points out what I want to dwell on a little bit. As I mentioned earlier, can you name one thing noteworthy in Lesley Stahl's career that she has done? And I'm not talking about some, title that she's held. Anybody can hold a title. There are presidents of the United States who held that, the noteworthy thing is that they won the election. But after that, what did they actually do? Right? It's amazing how few people there have been as president of the United States, right? Like 47 of them, 46, actually. Actually, it's 45 now that I think about it. I digress. How few people in American history have been the president of the United States, but even fewer, you could actually point to something noteworthy. Like, quick, what did Millard Fillmore do that's noteworthy? Right? There was a time when he was president. All right. So let's set aside as like, well, she's this or she's that or she's no. I understand. She was the first woman White House correspondent for a major network. She covered Jimmy Carter and she covered Ronald Reagan as the first woman doing that job. Okay, great. That's a title that she earned, right? Someone had to be the first woman. She was the first woman. But what did she do? Like, for instance, she was the first woman White House correspondent for a major network covering Jimmy Carter. So can you point to something she did as a reporter that was noteworthy, that actually made a difference, that challenged Jimmy Carter? Nothing. Nothing. I've been thinking about it. Scott Jennings just pointed out the fact that she's been in this position now since 1991. Since 1991. That's older than many of you are, right? That's longer than you've been on this planet. So what kind of lousy career is it that the only thing that's noteworthy about it is a moment like that? And yet her colleagues will not will not criticize her. They won't jump out. But why won't they? Why didn't Abby Phillips just jump in there and say, you know what, Scott, I'm glad you mentioned that because I share the same profession as Lesley Stahl, and that was atrocious. They won't do it. Jake Tapper won't do it. Wolf Blitzer won't do it. George Stephanopoulos won't do it. David Muir won't do it. Nobody will do it. And I'm talking about competitors, not colleagues that actually, share a lunchroom with Lesley Stahl. I'm talking about people on other networks. Why? Why won't they say what is obvious to the rest of humanity? Now, again, I'll get to it in a second. Here's another noteworthy moment for Lesley Stahl. This isn't on CBS News. I mentioned the Upper West Side of Manhattan, 92nd Street wide, the bastion. This is actually on the east side, if I remember right, East 92nd Street. It's a bastion of liberal intellectuals. You're nothing until you have a moment at the 92nd Street Y to have an audience full of liberal intellectuals, very, very rich liberal intellectuals, sit and wring their hands and ponder what it is to have to deal with flyover country. And here she is with Peggy Noonan talking about the future of media and journalism in America.
If you watch the opinion of us, how many people trust the press anymore? I mean, we're way down there with the lawyers.
Yeah.
This is really rough,
Yeah.
as you know.
You're way down there with Congress.
I despair. Seriously, I worry greatly. We're at a point where if the president of the United States is going to say legacy media is dead, well, I guess Musk said that. Legacy media is dead.
And he wants it dead. He wants other media.
But it is kind of sort of hobbling right now. And I don't know how it recovers. I'm very dark about it.
Well, Biden just pardoned Hunter for what was on the laptop that Lesley Stahl said was fake. And Lesley doesn't know how the media recovers. Retire, Lesley. With all due respect, you're the reason why.
Yeah, Jesse's right there. And of course, that was a moment, as you know, right before the inauguration when she made those remarks, as you heard from the reference to the pardon for Hunter Biden. But Lesley Stahl wondering why the media has such low ratings and why they're not trusted, and then immediately blaming Elon Musk and Donald Trump. Elon Musk might say that the legacy media is dead. Donald Trump might say the legacy media is dead. And boy, I worry about that because we're hobbled right now. Why? It has nothing to do with Donald Trump. Donald Trump doesn't have to say a damn thing about you. Elon Musk doesn't have to say a damn thing about you. You're doing it yourself, lady. What's killing legacy media? What's killing their approval ratings with the American people? Why don't we trust people like Lesley Stahl, 60 Minutes, or CBS News? This is why.
They were beating me and starving me.
Do you think they starved you or they just didn't have food?
That's why. The calls from coming inside the house, ma'am. You're to blame. You've created this situation. Peggy Noonan is right. We do want it to go away. We want legacy media to die because they don't deserve to have the prominence they have right now. There's a big controversy at the White House right now because the Trump administration is now taking control of seat assignments inside the briefing room. Yeah. You ever wonder why the certain reporters are in the front row all the time and they're all in the same assigned seats? It's not because the press secretary says that. The White House Correspondents Association, which, by the way, last time I checked, is not an official organization of the U.S. government. It's not protected by the Constitution. No one gives a crap about the White House Correspondents Association. They've taken control of the seat assignments in the briefing room. Who let that happen, by the way? And now the Trump administration is saying, no longer. We'll be in charge of who sits where in this room. It's our room. It's not your room. And they're all going to plan a sit-down strike, right? Like it's the 60s or something, and they're going to go back to their hippie days. They're going to play Peter, Paul, and Mary and celebrate the righteous cause of White House reporters. Give me a break. You want people to be on your side? Maybe you should get something right once in a while. Think about the White House correspondents for a second. They have one job, cover the presidency. And the White House correspondents who have literally a front row seat to the White House, to the president, and to the administration, either completely missed the biggest story of the Biden presidency, which was his mental, physical, and cognitive incapacity to do the job. They either missed that story, even though they had front row access to witness it themselves. They either missed it, they ignored it, or they helped cover it up. And now we're supposed to cry for them Our hearts are supposed to bleed for them because they're not allowed to pick their seats in the briefing room. That's why the American people have lost confidence in them. That's why people hate reporters like Lesley Stahl. I said that you'd remember her legacy for just this one last thing. That's not true. Two things. Number one, telling a hostage of Hamas that maybe they didn't deliberately starve him. Maybe they just didn't have food. And then there's this. She did not cover the 2020 presidential campaign. She covered up the 2020 presidential campaign. This was her behavior with Donald Trump on the Hunter Biden laptop story and on Spygate when the Comey-led FBI spied on the Trump campaign with the false made-up charges of Russian collusion. Watch and remember this exchange. And also note that part of the video you're going to see here, we only have because the Trump administration at the time made their own independent video. It got cut out. It got discarded. It got put on the editing room floor. They didn't want you to see it. You only see portions of this video because the Trump administration kept it. They didn't put it out there on 60 Minutes for their viewers to see. So
I think it's one of the biggest scandals I've ever seen, and you don't cover it. You want to talk about,
Well, because it can't be verified.
you want to talk
I'm
about
telling you.
insignificant things.
I'm telling you.
Of course it can be verified. Excuse me,
We
they found the
cannot-
laptop. Lesley,
Can't be
Lesley,
verified.
what can't be verified?
So they're talking about real fast, and this is the portion that they didn't let their viewers see, which is telling. That's why it's off mic. This was just a camera that the White House archivist set up. But they're talking about the Hunter Biden laptop story, and you hear her off mic say, it can't be verified. It can't be verified. A couple of news organizations at the moment they were conducting this interview had already verified the laptop. It can be verified. Of course it can be verified. You take a look at the IP addresses on the emails that have been sent and received. You compare it to the laptop's IP. You look at all these things. You can verify whether the hard drive was tampered with or not. The Daily Caller News Foundation, I know at this moment, had already verified it, as had the New York Post. This was collusion. This was media collusion and interference in the 2020 election, lying to the president and lying to viewers. That's why they edited this out, by the way. They didn't want their viewers to see this lie, that the laptop couldn't be verified. And the best punchline of all is that a year later, the New York Times, the Washington Post, and CBS News verified the laptop. It took them a year. Didn't have to. They could have done it right then and there. But they refused to. They ignored it. Like I said, they didn't cover the 2020 presidential campaign. They covered up the presidential campaign. They were not in the business of informing the American people. They were in the business of disinforming, misinforming, and withholding facts from the American viewer. All right, so let's get back to this video. This is what happened. Again, this was October. This is like 2 weeks before Election Day on 60 Minutes.
Laptop.
Why do you say that?
Because
Even the
it's
family
verified.
hasn't, the family on the laptop, he's gone into hiding. For 5 days, he's gone into hiding.
He's preparing for your debate.
Oh, it's taken him 5 days to prepare.
The last time he sat was 60 Minutes. In fact, he didn't talk to 60 Minutes during the entire 2024 presidential campaign. Everyone said, well, you got to go on 60 Minutes, right? You got to. And he won. He won by ignoring 60 Minutes, which is exactly how they should be treated. That's what you'll remember Lesley Stahl for. That's what you should remember. That there's nothing noteworthy about her entire career or legacy other than that moment and, of course, this latest moment.
They were beating me and starving me.
Do you think they starved you or they just didn't have food?
That right there is considered an elder statesman of the American media. That is considered a journalist with the legacy and the career that other people would die for. She is the grande dame of Washington, D.C. and Manhattan journalism. And that's what goes for prize-winning kind of reporting and interviewing. For 60 Minutes, the crown jewel of the CBS News chain, which includes the CBS Evening News, which is a catastrophe right now. And of course, let's not forget Face the Nation, which is run by Margaret Brennan, who is literally a laughingstock meme every Sunday when she tries to do her histrionic behavior against J.D. Vance or Marco Rubio. She's, of course, Marco Rubio. She was the one who said that free speech led to the Holocaust. That's where CBS News is right now. And I keep mentioning, why don't her competitors call her out? Why, again, in any other competitive field, right? Imagine if this were baseball or football and you see a player screw up like that and do something. No, you draw attention to yourself by saying, yeah, I'm better. I'm better. Why isn't NBC jumping up and down saying, man, I can't believe Lesley Stahl did that. You would never see that kind of behavior here at NBC News. I hope you pick us and stop watching over there. They never do that. And the reason is they're all in the same club. They're all in the same club. And by not criticizing each other, it's kind of like a protection scam. It's like being in the mafia, right? I got your back, you got my back. So when you do stuff like this, I won't call you out on it. So when I do stuff like this, I hope you don't call me out on it. Of course, it's only if you go down a certain path politically. I mean, if God forbid, Jake Tapper started cozying up to the Trump administration and started treating Democrat guests on his show hostilely, I assure you, other journalists would call him out on it. You got to stick with the team. You got to make sure that you toe the line and play by the rules. But as long as you toe the line, play by the rules, and you're on our side of the political equation, we got your back. And you can even do something like that, and you'll never get any criticism from your colleagues, even your colleagues on competitive networks. Because, whether you're on CBS or NBC or ABC or CNN or whatever, that's not important. We're all in this together. We're all on the same team, whether it's the peacock on NBC or the little eyeball on CBS. That's not our team color. Our team color is the left. We're here for the Democrats. We're here to promote the left-wing political agenda in this country. And as long as you're there, you're covered. You can do something stupid and asinine and evil, like tell a released hostage that they weren't really being starved by the terrorists. The terrorists just didn't have enough food for them. And you're golden. In fact, you're going to get a great retirement party. You'll probably get a great prize of a Pulitzer or a Peabody or an Emmy, because that's what they do. Just as long as you stay on the right team, the left. This is a great time to point out that I wrote a book about these assholes. It's called Shameless Liars: How Trump Defeated the Left-Wing Legacy Media and Made Them Irrelevant. In fact, I've got a full chapter on 60 Minutes. You don't believe me? I do. Hold on. Wait for it. Oh, where's my table of contents? See, I wasn't ready for this. Well, it's in my table of contents. Here. Oh, this is one of the best pitches I've ever made for my book. There it is. The pages were stuck together. There's the table of contents. See it right there. Chapter 9, 60 Minutes, runs out of time. Because we add not just this, but also how they falsely edited Kamala Harris's interview with them. It's a great book that breaks down every lie that the media told about the 2024 presidential election, tells you why they are the way they are, and how we've now transcended and don't need them anymore. This show right here and your audience participation is living proof of it. So check out my book. You can get it in hardcover, paperback, and audiobook narrated by me, the author. It's called Shameless Liars. Check it out on Amazon today. Yesterday, it was a fiery panel discussion on CNN, and it all has to do with this meme out there, this storyline. You may have seen it, that the Trump administration is deporting people without due process just because they've got tattoos. Well, as soon as you see a story like that and think, well, that sounds too strange to be true, trust your instincts. That's not the entire truth, but let's go to CNN and take a look at how they framed the story.
By simply having certain symbols in your tattoos and wearing certain streetwear brands. That alone is enough to get someone classified as TDA and sent to El Salvador.
That's not true, actually, Andrew.
According to this document, it is.
Shame on you and shame on the mainstream media for trying to cover for these individuals
I'm not trying to cover
who have.
for anyone.
This
That's
is a
not
vicious
fair.
gang, Andrew, and you are questioning the credibility of these agents who are putting their life on the line.
That is what the document said.
Can we go back just to the
All right, so let's just pause there for a minute, because there's Abby Phillips, the wise, sage, intelligent host of this panel. using her credibility and her brand's credibility by saying, well, that is, in fact, what the document said. Well, that's not entirely what the document said. In fact, everybody who's talking about this, how the ICE right now is using a point system, and based on how many of these characteristics that fall under who you are and what you represent, you are potentially facing deportation. And yes, part of it is wearing gang tattoos. Let's just be clear on what kind of tattoos we're talking about here. Okay. Yeah, that's your friendly neighborhood father of three who's just trying to earn a living by working as a, plumber or something, just trying to carve out a good name for himself, right? Who cares what his face tattoo is? Who cares what kind of gang symbols he's got, right? It's just tattoos, dang it. Why is everybody, gosh, how could you deport this innocent little baby just because he's got a couple of tattoos? There, but for the grace of God, doesn't Pete Hegseth have tattoos? Yeah. So let's just put that in perspective, number one. Number two, they're all leaving out one very important characteristic here, okay? Oh, just because they have a tattoo and a gang symbol and they dress a certain way, you're going to deport them? Well, okay, that factors into the equation. And the ICE agents, through their years of law enforcement training, make the judgment call on this. Yes, that's true. We trust law enforcement to make judgment calls like that based on the directive of their superiors and by the commander-in-chief, because this is a immigration issue and a national security issue. But here's the one thing they keep leaving out of the equation. Well, it's just a father of three with some tattoos and you just deport him and send him to El Salvador? Yeah, there's one other thing. They're here illegally. They came into the country illegally. They continue to break our laws. Why are you leaving that part out of the equation? All right, so now let's watch how this conversation goes, specifically when Scott Jennings joins in. Scott Jennings, which we mention often, is one of the only reasons still to watch CNN, because you want to see him own these people. And apparently Abby Phillips is getting a little tired of that. Apparently Abby Phillips is a little tired of Scott Jennings actually stealing the thunder on this show, because let's face it, nobody watches, what's the name of this show? Abby Phillips Tonight? Nobody watches Abby Phillips Tonight because of Abby Phillips. They watch, and they know this, by the way, just a little dirty secret about ratings and television. They know on a per 15-minute basis what their numbers are, like overnight, but they know like the 15-minute quadrants. We had more people watching in this 15 minutes than we did in this 15 minutes. They know when people tune in. They know when people tune out. And they know that the reason people are watching is Scott Jennings. You tune in, Jennings isn't on the panel. So maybe Abby Phillips is getting a little tired of playing second banana to the conservative commentator sitting right next to her. Watch how this transpires.
The premise of what Joe Rogan was talking about, because he's right. It's horrific to believe that in a constitutional democracy like the United States of America, where it's supposed to be guaranteed that we are having to rely on information based on an administration that does not have a good relationship with the truth. They're not even willing to provide the judges who are part of these cases with the documents to prove that some of these individuals actually either did have due process or had been found to be criminal gang members. And let's be very clear. I don't think anybody at this table wants criminals in this country who are murdering children, who are hurting people. I think that's we can probably go baseline there. But what I think we have to ask ourselves is,
well, I'm not so sure I'm ready to concede that point. I'm sorry. The proof is in the policy. The proof is in the enforcement of laws. When she says, I don't think there's anyone here at this table who wants people to be in this country committing crimes and murdering or terrorizing or molesting, it's like, okay, then what did you and your party and the policies you support and the president you support, what did you do to prevent that from happening? And if, in fact, your policies encouraged that behavior by keeping the border wide open and looking the other way and not having any sort of active enforcement in securing the border, preventing illegal entry, and rounding up people who shouldn't be in this country and deporting them back to where they came from, if your policies don't do that and your policies allow for all those horrible things to happen, then I'm sorry, I'm not willing to stipulate this. I'm not willing to consider, well, nobody here at this table wants these horrible things to happen. Well, you haven't done anything to stop it. And in fact, your policies that you support and the politicians that you support have allowed it to happen. So no, actually, I think that that's still in question. That said, let's get to Scott Jennings.
If you believe in a constitutional democracy, do you not want your president to follow the law? And by the way, in our own CNN poll, a vast majority of Americans said they're concerned and want to see Donald Trump follow the law.
Scott, isn't this exactly what we denounce other countries for doing? Not giving our own citizens, when they get wrongfully detained around the world, our own citizens the due process that they deserve?
Well, I think multiple things could be true. Number one, I delineate between American citizens and everyone else. If you're a U.S. citizen, I put you in a different category.
On due process, that's not a distinction that the law makes.
If you've come here and broken our laws
Scott,
and committed violent acts or murdered and raped and whatever, I put you in a different category.
When it comes to the law and due process, that is not a distinction.
Well, if you'd like to argue that Trinidad should have the same rights and that you get as an American citizen, go ahead.
I don't change the Constitution.
Hold on a second. The argument is
you're saying terrorists can walk across the border and become effectively a U.S. citizen?
That's not what I'm saying.
Scott, look at me. Okay.
Yeah, let's give the host
you and I are talking. You and I are talking. Okay. What I'm saying.
Wow. I mean, honestly, look at Scott. He's got the patience of Job. I'd love to host this show. Just one. It is literally a roundtable discussion. It's like, lady, why in the hell do you have all of these people here around this table and have their voices as they all start interacting with each other and Scott Jennings against the world every single time. And they all start interacting and they all start challenging him. So Scott starts responding to them because, it's a roundtable discussion. And Abby Phillips patronizes him, treats him like a preschooler. Scott, you and I are talking. Look at me now. It's like, lady, the whole point of your show and the whole conceit is that we're sitting around a table and we're exchanging our ideas and our opinions. So they all come after him. He starts engaging, and then she treats him like the problem. She's condescending to him. Look at his face. Oh, this is just horrific. It's almost done.
Saying to you is that the law does not make a distinction between U.S. citizens and everybody else when it comes to being accused of crimes. Are you saying that should not be in place? That if you happen to not be a citizen, you get to be thrown into a jail with no process at all?
I'm saying that these people are effectively terrorists. They walked across our borders illegally.
Okay.
They are violent. I don't really want them
here.
But
doesn't the government have to prove that they are who they say they are?
Correct.
That's all
we're saying.
That's all.
I mean,
you can say it
eventually.
It's not a concession that you like Trinidad and Tobago. It's just a question of.
Listen, guys, I know that the whole point of this show is for me to interact with the video. So I got to stop there and we'll get through it. I promise. But did you notice what she just said there? We're going to roll it back here real fast. Isn't it incumbent on the government to prove these people are who they say they are? That's what she said, right?
Be thrown into a jail with no process at all?
I'm saying that these people are effectively terrorists. They walked across our borders illegally.
Okay.
They are violent. I don't really want them here.
But doesn't the government have to prove that they are who they say they are?
Yeah. Abby, let's do voter ID now. If that's your criteria, it's like, the government shouldn't just be able to do this without proving these people are who they say they are. Well, what if they show up to vote? What if those exact same people that you're now saying that it's incumbent on the government to prove that they are who they say they are? What about if that exact same person shows up to vote? Shouldn't that person prove they are who they say they are? And how do they do that without photo ID? By the way, this whole, you've got to prove they are who they say they are. You keep calling them undocumented. By definition, that is a person without documentation and proof of who they are. They are who they say they are. They're the ones who have come here without documentation. They're the ones who have come here without being able to prove they are who they say they are. And now you're putting all the onus back on the government. Let's just be clear here. This is not a typical immigration issue. Tren de Agua, Agra, I don't know how to pronounce it. Go somewhere else for pronunciation. TDA. The president, in his power exclusively for the executive branch, has determined that this group is a terrorist organization. As commander-in-chief and through national security, they are in this country illegally. They are terrorists. They can be taken. They can be sent away. Period. This is not a jurisprudence issue. This is not a constitutional rights issue. This is not a law and order issue. This is a national security issue. All they have to do is identify them as a threat, identify them as in the country illegally, identify them as part of this group, and they're gone. That's it. And it's up to the judgment of the people on the front lines who are dealing with this. But I love this new standard. Doesn't the government have to prove they are who they say they are? Great. Now do voter ID, and we'll have a real conversation. All right, let's finish it up.
Correct.
I
That's
think.
all we're saying.
That's all.
I think.
I mean, you can say it
eventually,
it's not a councession that you like Tren de Aragua. It's just a question of the basics of civics in this country.
I think eventually the government will have to show all of its cards on everybody that they have detained, deported, or done anything to in this arena. But there is no doubt that the Trump administration is rounding up effectively terrorists who came across here illegally, committed horrific acts, and do not need to be in this country.
They are doing that, perhaps, but they're also doing a lot of other things too. And that's why the courts are asking questions about it. We do have to leave it there because coming up next, our panel is going to give us their nightcaps.
Wow, that is remarkable and a hell of a fiery roundtable. And there you go. That's Abby Phillips, who, like I said, I'll just go back to my main thesis here. I think she's getting a little sick and tired of Scott Jennings stealing her thunder and stealing the spotlight and being the only reason why that show is watchable right now. And barely that. So hopefully her producers had a little conversation where they're saying, listen, you're trying to kill the goose that laid the golden egg here. You might want to not go after Jennings that way because it makes him look really good. It makes you look really stupid and inconsistent, by the way, and hypocritical and double standard. I mean, sure, government needs to due process, very important for people in the country illegally committing crimes and part of a gang that has been deemed a terrorist organization. I'll tell you what, where was your concern about due process with all of the people who were jailed after January 6th? I'm waiting. Hey, if you like this show, it means you like Town Hall Media because this show is presented and produced and distributed by Town Hall Media. It's right there in the logo. Town Hall Media is a collection of multiple websites. We've been around for a very long time. You know, there's a lot of fly-by-night websites, but townhall.com, hotair.com, redstate.com. We're talking about decades of service to the conservative cause. Why don't you take the moment right now to go to townhallvip.com and become a VIP member? Not only do you get an ad-free experience on all of our sites, you also get exclusive content just for VIP members. And finally, you'll help support our work. You'll keep us free from the advertising revenue that big tech in Silicon Valley can shut off just like that. You know, these advertising boycotts that have been instituted over the years against right-leaning sites, they claim that we're misinformation. Yeah, you know what was misinformation that they came after us for? We had articles that said that the COVID-19 virus leaked from a lab in Wuhan. That's right. We missed out on advertising revenue on the internet because they didn't like that story. That's why we need our VIP program. It keeps us free from that kind of onerous censorship. So please go to townhallvip.com. Oh, and I left out the best part. You use my name in the code there when you're checking out, and you get 50% off your membership. That's huge. So go to townhallvip.com, and thank you very much for your support. There is something about Donald Trump let's do that again. There is something about Donald Trump that forces Democrats to defend the indefensible. You remember it from the campaign. Kamala Harris, do you really want to use tax dollars to pay for gender transition for convicted felons? Well, I'll just support the law and follow the law. Oh, so you do want to use tax dollars. And this is the sort of thing that they defend because it's some kind of righteous cause. Well, today on Capitol Hill in the Judiciary Committee, Democrats led by Jamie Raskin are defending the indefensible, MS-13 gang members who they think deserve to have as many freedoms and rights in this country, even though they're here illegally, as you do, as your children get to enjoy. Take a look at Jamie Raskin.
By Congress. Well, the majority says it's because these are radical judges. And they lead off, as our good Chairman Issa did, with Judge Jeb Boasberg, the chief judge of the District Court of the District of Columbia, who enjoined the mass roundup and deportation of immigrants to an infamous El Salvadoran prison in peacetime without any due process at all, allegedly under the Alien Enemies Act of 1798, a statute explicitly limited to wartime and military invasion. Some of our colleagues have been railing against Judge Boasberg for ordering the planes to be turned around. They say those planes were filled with terrorists, I think my good friend from Texas said. Well, here's one person of many who wasn't a terrorist on that flight or a gangbanger. His name's Kilmer Garcia. He's a Marylander married to a U.S. citizen who has a 5-year-old son with autism. And he went to pick up his son, but he was picked up first by ICE. And then he was shackled and put on that airplane and shipped off to the torturers of El Salvador without ever having the benefit of those two most beautiful words in the English language, due process. He never saw a judge. Nobody ever told him what he was being charged for. Nobody ever told him that there were any charges against him. And he was sent to a mega prison run by the self-proclaimed dictator of El Salvador. And yesterday, you know what happened, Mr. Chairman? The Trump administration admitted that it had made a mistake. He was not actually a gangbanger. He was not a criminal. It was all a mistake. If there'd been due process, maybe that would have been determined, but there wasn't. But they put him on that plane in El Salvador. Well, all's well that ends well, right? No. The administration says there's nothing they can do about it now because he's no longer in U.S. custody. This guy who lives in my state, married to a U.S. citizen with citizen children, he's stuck with the dictator of El Salvador. Well,
all right, now there's more to this, but let me just be clear that Mr. Raskin, as usual, left out some very important details here. Number one, first and foremost, that he entered this country illegally and still is in this country illegally. Yes, he's married to a U.S. citizen, but that doesn't mean his status necessarily has changed, number one. Number two, it says in the exact same court documents that he's citing here that the Trump administration has, in fact, identified him as a gang member of MS-13. Lives in his state. I assure you, he doesn't live in his neighborhood. He doesn't live in Tacoma Park, the liberal enclave right on the border of Washington, D.C., in which Jamie Raskin lives. You know, Jamie Raskin's from Washington, D.C., but he wanted to be a politician. He wanted to be a congressman, and the District of Columbia doesn't have any congressmen that have voting rights, so he moved to Maryland just so he could be in Congress. What a guy he is. Jamie Raskin does not cozy up to gang members. He wouldn't go into their neighborhoods. Are you kidding me? He's from Tacoma Park, damn it. You stay on your side of the fence in Maryland. I know this. I live in Maryland too. But there's more. Let's follow up here with Jamie Raskin as he continues to defend judges who try to take it upon themselves to make judgment calls about our national security issues.
While appealing whichever ones they want to appeal and to demand the return of people unlawfully taken to El Salvador on that so-called plane full of gangbangers. And I especially, while appealing whichever ones they want to appeal and to demand the return of people unlawfully taken to El Salvador on that so-called plane full of gangbangers. And I especially, while appealing which
I'm so sorry. I don't know why that clip just keeps flipping the same way. So he wants these people brought home. He wants every single person rounded up, put back on a plane, and returned back to the United States. Let me just and listen. This is complicated stuff. I recognize that, although it's not really complicated. They're making it more complicated than it needs to be, because they're talking about this as if this is a specific due process, civil rights, constitutional issue for criminals or people who are accused who are arrested. And again, where were any of these people when the very worst kind of abuses of our federal law enforcement was perpetrated against people on January 6th who literally walked through a door that was held open by a police officer on Capitol Hill? If Jamie Raskin had anything to say about the people whose rights were violated by the heavy-handed Justice Department under Merrick Garland and Joe Biden, then maybe I'd actually pay a little bit of attention to this. But the problem is you can't conflate these things. This is a terrorist organization. This is the President of the United States acting within the realm of Commander-in-Chief, protecting our homeland from invading terrorists who are here. Now, through law enforcement, through ICE, through immigration enforcement, they rounded up hundreds of these people that they identified as members of this terrorist group, and they sent them out of here. They've conceded now that this one person was not TDA, he was MS-13. That doesn't mean he shouldn't have been rounded up and sent out. It just means they're acknowledging that he wasn't one of the TDA people. He was an MS-13 person. Trust me, there's more to find out about this. And Jamie Raskin's asking about due process. Well, there is due process in this country. His family is suing. They're going to try to get their person. I mean, the process is happening. But just be clear here. When you're defending our country from an invasion of a hostile terrorist organization, you got to do whatever you can to protect the innocent in this country and protect the homeland. And if that means theoretically, hypothetically, that somebody got rounded up that shouldn't have, yeah, that might happen. But that's not for a judge to deal with. You don't think that in wartime in Afghanistan or in Iraq, some innocent people also get rounded up incorrectly and are dealt with when we're at war? Of course, that's what happens. I'm not happy about it. But to say that this is some sort of violation of the Constitution and the president should be impeached and all these people should be brought back, they're not serious people. They don't understand the havoc that has been wreaked upon this country by the Biden administration by allowing tens of millions into this country illegally who continue to violate our laws and are violent felons. And yes, the only way you can start to reverse that trend is to go pretty heavy-handed with a sledgehammer to make sure that the message is sent that we won't tolerate this anymore. But all the weeping and all of the defending is for the indefensible, not for you. Do you see Jamie Raskin ever passionately defending you and your rights? Do you see Jamie Raskin worried about the people who are murdered and raped or whose stores are robbed and burgled by the people who are in this country illegally? No, you don't. Their compassion and their empathy only goes in one direction. And even better, when Jamie Raskin is done, they hand the microphone over to a dimwit like Hank Johnson, whose only claim to fame is to think that the island of Guam might tip over if too many Marines are deployed there.
A climate of fear and trepidation has descended upon the nation. The people of America are more afraid today for our democracy and for their personal safety than ever in our lifetimes. College students have disappeared off the streets paramilitary style by plainclothes, mask-wearing individuals and held incognito for days before they are discovered thousands of miles away in some private for-profit ICE detention facility. Why? For exercising their free speech First Amendment rights. A climate of...
Wow. That's the America Hank Johnson sees. That's the America the Democrats want you to believe is existing right now. And this whole climate of fear about Donald Trump, they're creating this out of whole cloth, and it doesn't exist. The American people are actually in support of and in favor of exactly the policies that Donald Trump is executing right now. It's why he got elected. He's doing exactly what he said he was going to do. And Democrats continue, as I said, to defend the indefensible. This is an 80-20 issue, and they continue to throw down with the 20%. And I know that they want you all to think that all of those people with the tattoos on their faces and who were just involved in gang violence that have been rounded up and deported, that they're really just members of the Knights of Columbus at your local parish, and they're members of the PTA. And what did Jamie Raskin say? A father who was picking up his autistic son from therapy. Oh, okay. That's what they want you to believe this is. But in reality, for every one story that they try to boost up and put out like that, you've got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people like this.
Shoot at ICE agents on site. That's right. If ICE agents are trying to take you or a loved one, shoot them on site. The way they're pulling up with masks on, with unmarked vehicles, no badge, no nothing, it could be anybody. It can be gang members. You have every right to shoot at them. This would be the best self-defense case. You're just in fear for your life. You don't know who's behind that unmarked vehicle or who's behind that mask.
There you go. There you go. That's so let the American people decide. Are you on the side of Jamie Raskin? Do you and Hank Johnson and the Democrats who think that everybody deserves due process and we shouldn't have any of these crackdowns and we shouldn't be rounding people up, we shouldn't check to see if they're in the country illegally, we shouldn't be deporting them? No. And people like that who are saying, hey, shoot ICE agents on site. Come on, you have every right to defend yourself. Just go ahead and shoot ICE agents. Is that the side that the American people are going to be on, do you think? Or do you think they're on the side of an administration who finally takes law and order seriously, who takes our immigration laws seriously, who takes national security seriously, who recognize a terrorist threat for what it is? Because Venezuela is not our friend. They're not our ally. And let's not forget that the reason that those people who were deported are in a Salvadoran jail is because the country of Venezuela wouldn't even take them themselves. They knew who they were. They didn't want them. Are you on the side of an administration who's actually finally serious about national security, border security, and enforcing our immigration laws? I'm willing to let the people decide on this. It's a pretty clear choice. Hey, I want you to check out our merch store. The link is right down below in the show notes for this video, but we've got great merchandise items that are all part of the Town Hall ecosphere. Lots of MAGA stuff you might like, lots of funny stuff, lots of cool stuff, lots of patriotic stuff at store.townhall.com, store.townhall.com. And most importantly, if you like this show, you need to get our mug. That's right. You can get a Larry Town Hall mug so you can drink your favorite beverages every single day right there with the greatest name ever invented in the English language emblazoned across it. And then when you're drinking it and they say, wait a second, your name's not Larry, your name's Jennifer. You can just say, my name is Jennifer, but you can call me Larry. Go to store.townhall.com. Check it out today. Listen, I think it's an understatement to say that we dodged a bullet in November when Donald Trump won the election in such overwhelming fashion. Can you imagine if Kamala Harris were president right now and what her first 100 days would look like? Bullet dodged big time. And then when you look at the next step down on the ticket, J.D. Vance versus Tim Walz, good Lord, what a nightmare Tim Walz is, right? In fact, if you're curious as to how bad things are over in the life of Tim Walz and in his household, take a look at his daughter, who fashions herself a bit of a TikTok influencer. Well, first, she had a major announcement on TikTok about her future plans for graduate school. Because I know you've been sitting here every day wondering, I wonder what Tim Walz's daughter is going to do about grad school. Well, now you know. Take a look.
I got into grad school. I will not be attending starting this fall, though, and I will no longer be attending the university that I originally applied for. I applied for one school. I kind of had my heart set on it. That's what I wanted to do. I'm not going to name the institution, but given recent events, I am not going to give my money, go into debt for support institutions that don't support their students. And the right to protest and, speak out for their communities. That's just not where I'm at. Students deserve to be protected. I'm not worried about if I were to be protected or not at said institution. I'm, privileged white woman, but I'm not going. I got into grad school.
Well, it's true. She is a privileged white woman. And it isn't remarkable that her own dad is not going to pay for her graduate school. I'm not saying that every dad should pay for graduate school, but her dad is a teacher, don't forget, was a teacher for years, is now the governor, now can make major coin when he goes out and gives a speech. So why is she going to go into debt for grad school? Number one. Number two, love to know what she was going to get an advanced degree in. That would be enlightening. Number three, it's Columbia. Obviously, I'm not going to name the institution. It's Columbia. Because why? Because Columbia just agreed to the Trump administration's demands. Here's what happened. The Trump administration cut off funding of like $400 million worth of grants, which, by the way, why in the hell are we giving Columbia University $400 million of my hard-earned tax dollars? That said, they cut off $400 million in grants unless Columbia University instituted a couple of provisions there to ensure the rights of all the students, right? For instance, you're not allowed to wear a mask on campus because all of the pro-Hamas, pro-terrorist protesters who shut down the campus last year, they all had masks on. And I'm not talking about masks because they're afraid they're going to catch a fake Wuhan virus. No, these were like scarves as if they were the Hamas terrorists that they glorify every day, those Palestinian scarves, keffiyehs or whatever. So one of the rules was people aren't allowed to hide their identity by wearing masks on campus, number one. Number two, they're not allowed to occupy and shut down buildings. These don't seem like onerous demands, by the way. They're not allowed to shut down buildings. They're not allowed to tell other students that they're barred from crossing campus or entering a building. And it's funny, the only students that were kept from crossing campus or entering buildings were Jewish. What's that all about, Columbia? What's that all about, Ms. Walls? So Columbia said, okay, fine. We're going to go ahead and do all those things. And so now they got their money back from the federal government, and Tim Walz's daughter is outraged at that. Well, you can kiss my tuition goodbye. Yeah, I don't think Columbia cares, honestly. That's the dirty little secret here. So she's grandstanding and she's saying, that's it. I'm not going to go to grad school because of that. And honestly, depending on what her career was going to be, I'm sure that we're all really brokenhearted over the fact that she's not going to advance her education in whatever chosen field. I'm guessing gender studies. Could be wrong. Maybe anthropology. I'm thinking she just wanted a gap year and she didn't know how to tell mom and dad that. So she's using this as an excuse. But then our crack researchers here at the Larry Show decided to delve a little further into young Ms. Walz's TikTok, and we found some real gems here.
This moral high ground that certain people have, and this like talk about protecting the children and keeping tampons out of boys' bathrooms, which tells me they didn't even read the bill, but that's a whole nother thing. Also, if you have a wife or like a daughter above the age of like 12, 13, ages vary, you share a bathroom, you probably also have tampons in your bathroom. And the fact that they scare you and you're so obsessed with it is fucking weird.
Who here thinks that it sort of hits a nerve that her dad is referred to as Tampon Tim everywhere she goes? Who here thinks that she's having trouble coming to terms with the fact that she's the daughter of someone named Tampon Tim? I think that may be the root of this. And I'm sorry, we did read the bill. We know exactly what it says. And you sharing a bathroom with your wife or your daughter or your sister, and there's tampons there, is a lot different than a boys' room in a public school. You know, for boys. Boys, by definition, do not have a uterus. But not in her world. And then there's this little gem about our president of the United States.
Signing an executive order that pertains to 1% of the population is not protecting women.
All right. I'm sorry. We're going to get through it. I promise I won't stop it again. But this whole thing is about, I think it's about men and women's sports, right? Yeah, this is banning men and women's sports. And first of all, that's a whole lie. It only affects this percentage. No, every woman who plays sports is affected by this if this is allowed to happen, because if the man wins the championship, that affected every woman, right? Number one. But the real reason I wanted to stop is the up talking. My God, what is wrong with this? Thank God my daughters don't talk like this. Would drive me nuts. Where did she pick this up? Why is this a TikTok thing? Is this just because they see other people on social media and they think this is the way they're supposed to talk to get attention? I can't unhear it. Listen to the sing-songy up talking here. It just makes me want to drill a hole in my ears until they bleed. All right, I'll let it play now.
Signing an executive order that pertains to 1% of the population is not protecting women. It's setting a dangerous precedent, and it is dangerous for the trans community, women, minorities, anyone who is not a straight white man. We are talking about human beings, and the president of the United States is targeting them just because he thinks it gains him political points or whatever. Because this thing that he's so worried about it's not real. It doesn't affect the people that he's trying to protect. It hurts them. Like, seriously, I think a lot of us need to open up a history book, because what's going on right now is textbook. It's textbook. And truly it's boring and it's loser behavior. I have never felt unsafe around a trans person. I have felt unsafe around men. So maybe let's deal with that. If these people that are in charge right now were really the big, strong, manly leaders that they claim to be, they wouldn't be doing things like this. They'd mind their own business, do what they need to do. They would not be doing this. They should be embarrassed. It also just shows how insecure they really are. Also, whenever I post anything political and it blows up whatsoever, I get shadow banned. So there I am again because I made fun of Elon Musk. How fragile must you be? How fragile. Anyways, protect trans kids, protect trans people.
She's something else. I want her to run for Congress. Isn't she terrific? This harms women. It harms women to make sure that human beings with male genitalia aren't disrobing next to them in the school locker room. It harms women. It harms women to make sure that the first time a 14-year-old girl sees a naked man, it's not against her consent. That harms women. And honestly, listen, I love this because she truly represents exactly where the Democrat Party continues to position themselves in. This is where they're living. And good. She's a thought leader, man. She's going to rival David Hogg if she keeps this up. And I'd love the impulse that every time something pisses you off, you pick up your phone and you post a TikTok video. This day, she was really upset because Donald Trump bought a Tesla. Real fast, before we get to Tim Walz raised this young woman. You know, in that last video, she was talking about what it means to be a real man, how real men behave. This is what a secure man does. Tim Walz is her role model for what a secure masculine person is supposed to do and how they're supposed to behave. So I think that we should say a little prayer for her and extend a little grace, because Lord knows she's got a skewed understanding of what it means to be a real and secure man in this society. All right. Really triggered by Trump buying a Tesla.
Literally kidnapping somebody that you disagree with politically, and then just a couple days later, staging some weird commercial for your friend who spent a ridiculous amount of money on your reelection for his cars in front of the White House is dystopian as hell. Meanwhile, the markets are crashing. There's measles outbreaks. They're literally ripping apart the Department of Education and therefore public education. Oh, and eggs are still fucking expensive. More so, actually. It's not like anybody told people that this would happen. Oh, wait, people did. People literally said all of this would happen. At this point, if you're still defending it, there's no coming back from it. I'm a pretty forgiving person, but we are so far past that point. I think a lot of people are so far past that point, so I'm probably just like beating a dead horse at this point. But yeah, it's truly astonishing how far we have fallen in such a short time. But again, people told you that this would happen, so here we are.
Who here thinks she's not a very forgiving person? Also, by the way, that whole eggs are so expensive, that didn't last long, did it? That did not age well. Oh, we warned you this would happen. Yeah, I assure you that we knew full well. She does have her dad's hairline. That's impressive, isn't it? God. Woo! I'll be honest, though, she's in her own way a little bit more masculine than her dad. She's more like mom in that respect. All right. Do we want one more of Tim Walz's daughter? I love that her name is Hope, too, because everything about her is nothing but optimism and hope. I wonder if she and Kamala's armpit hair stepdaughter got along well on the campaign trail. But there's a podcast I'd watch. Whoo, boy. You know how Democrats are always like, it's not the people that we don't like, it's the politician. It's Trump. It's not Trump supporters. And I always remind you that, no, in fact, it's the opposite. They may not like Trump, but they're really pissed off at you. They hate you for daring to support him, for daring to like him. They've always hated Republicans, the individuals. They hate who you are. They hate what you believe. They hate what you stand for. And, well, she sort of gives it away here.
I understand that this is an extremely privileged take to be able to have. But I grew up in the church. I grew up going to church. I'm confirmed. I even worked at a church camp when I was in school. Not like the creepy, like colonizer type kind, but like the let's go hiking because the earth and, nature and the world around us is amazing and we need to protect it. And there's a greater power, that created that whole thing. My mom still goes to church multiple times a week. I'm in it. I don't really know where I stand right now, but I'm in it. I know it. And I want to say I sleep okay at night because I know all these people are not going where they think they're going. They're going to the bad place. If this isn't already the bad place. And history will show that. So, yeah.
I go to church all the time. My mom goes to church, not one of those colonizer churches. And I can just tell you from my perspective, all Trump supporters are going to hell, which has got to be one of the most Christian things I've ever heard somebody say. You always know that you're dealing with a real Orthodox doctrinaire Christian when they spend all their time telling you that you're going to hell because of who you vote for. That's a sure sign of the Christian faith. All right, let's wrap things up with some perspective here. That's Tim Walz's daughter. We've gotten quite a look at her, haven't we? Boy, did they keep her under wraps during the campaign. I mean, at least the Kamala Harris campaign did something properly. They didn't screw that one up. Boy, they called that one right. Keep her under wraps. For God's sake, whatever you do, keep her off social media. We don't want anyone knowing who she is. But let's check in. What's Tim Walz's son doing these days? Let's ask Tim Walz. He had a little story to share.
So I got an 18-year-old Gus, and I'm with Gus out there. And I'm having one of those dad talks with him. I was giving Gus my wisdom on what he had done wrong. I was because I know these things, right? I'm the dad. In the middle of it, he gives me the old, says the guy who got his ass kicked by Donald Trump. And I'm like, okay.
All right, I like Gus. I want to see Gus's TikTok. There's daily musings that I'll follow. I love that. Even Tim Walz's son is giving him crap. Can you imagine? Hey, Gus, take out the trash and clean up your room. What the hell? You're screwing up. You're a major screw up in life. What are you doing? Spend all your time on the sofa playing video games. Go out and get a job and make something of yourself. Oh, says the guy who's got his ass kicked by Donald Trump. That's fantastic. Although, to be fair and accurate to Gus, Gus, come on, man. That's no way to talk to your dad. Don't do that. That's no fair. Come on. You're a grown man. You're an adult. You're 18 now. You can make your own choices, but it's not right to tell your dad that he got his ass kicked by Donald Trump. Let's be clear. Tim Walz got his ass kicked by J.D. Vance. Kamala Harris got her ass kicked by Donald Trump. That's better. All right, that's a wrap. Thank you guys for being part of our show today. Angela for a $5 super chat. Thank you, Angela. Jamie Ratskin is despicable. What about the grandmother in Georgia who was killed and sexually abused? Oh, when she was dead, when the abuse took place. Evil, they are. It's absolutely. But like I said, the way I framed that entire segment, something about Donald Trump and the policy choices he makes and what he decides to lead with that forces Democrats, for some, they cannot help themselves. They defend the indefensible, and they think that they're being, pure and altruistic, and nope. Thank you, Angela. Good point. Oh, and another $2 super chat from Angela. Pretty sure mass deportations were decided November 5th. Yeah, you tell me anything that's happening right now that that Donald Trump didn't promise that he would do when he got elected. That brings me back. I didn't make this point when I saw it, but during the CNN panel, when the liberal on the CNN panel with Scott Jennings said, polls overwhelmingly showed that they want Donald Trump to follow the law. What a stupid poll question. Of course, that's what polls do. The American people expect Donald Trump to follow the law. Who's asking that question? Poll question. Do you expect Donald Trump to follow the law? Yeah, that's what we expect. Of course we do. You see, the American people expect you to follow the law, and Donald Trump's answer would be, I am following the law. By the way, it was the Biden administration that ignored the law when it came to border security and deportations and immigration enforcement. You want to talk about following the law? Don't get me started. Oh, Tommy liked the show today. Well, I appreciate that, Tommy. Tommy's literally in the other room right now. Thanks, Tommy. Appreciate that. And it is a wrap. We are done today. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate it. We'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place. My name's Larry O'Connor, and you can call me Larry.